Everyone, Matt here from Doc's Running, and today we're going to talk about the Wave Inspire 20, do a brief review, and talk about who this shoe might actually work for. So the Inspire 20 is Mizuno's moderate stability shoe. I would argue it's kind of more mild moderate now based on a couple changes that we'll talk about in the 20. It's been around obviously for 2 decades now, a little bit over that, and some major updates happened with the last version where they really smoothed out the heel and the geometry of the shoe and made it a lot less clunky than the 18. The transition from the 19 and 20 was mostly an upper update. There was a change in the plate that wasn't really obvious, at least in the specs that were given, but it changed a lot of things that I think are worth talking about. So getting into some of those specs, men's size 9 is coming in at 10.6 ounces per running warehouse. Women's size 8 is coming in at 8.8 ounces, 37.5 in the heel, 25.5 in the forefoot for an 8mm drop, although from the Mizuno website, it's still fairly the same. It's like, I think it's 38 in the heel, 26 in the forefoot. Again, consistent 12mm drop. Still Mizuno Energy foam in 2 layers throughout the length of this shoe, and it feels actually good. It's classic Mizuno where it's just a little bit firmer. These newer foams do make this shoe not feel as heavy as the listed weight, so there's just a little bit of spring to it, but it's still kind of more solid, little bit firmer ride. This is a stability shoe in the fact that there is the wave plate here, which apparently is now plant-based, and that actually changed some things. It is supposedly anatomic, which means it's supposed to be following the arch of your foot. I will say in version 19, which will have a comparison review, did feel like there was a lot of aggressive pressure. Not a lot, but a decent amount of aggressive pressure right in my heel. In this version, it feels a little bit more spread out, a little bit more subtle. So actually, and Bach gets credit for this, for calling it like a little bit more stable wave rider is really how it feels, where it feels very similar, although a tiny bit heavier. But again, the stability is there. I put this more at a mild to moderate stability shoe than the previous version just because it's integrated a lot more throughout the length of the shoe rather than just here, at least how it feels. But it still feels plenty stable. It feels great for longer efforts, for easy runs. It's not a shoe you're going to pick up the pace in, but it's just great for hammering miles in. It's still a 12mm drop shoe, and we'll talk about some people that might benefit from that, and that feels similar, but the geometry and bevel here actually doesn't make it feel like that. I almost make it feel like a 9 to 10mm drop shoe. Didn't get in the way, so smooth ride, great for daily runs, feels pretty consistent, which is what Mizuno is known for. Upper is where things supposedly changed a lot. There's more volume and a little bit more width up top, and I felt that almost immediately. It's still got a really good lockdown. The inner liner of this shoe is so comfortable, and it's one of the few shoes that I feel comfortable wearing sockless, although that's not for everyone. Still got a stiff heel counter that didn't bother me initially, but the padding is a little bit thin, so those people with some like heel sensitivities, you might be a little bit careful with that. But outside of that, secure and a fairly good mild to moderate stability shoe that is fairly consistent outside of the fact that the plate is kind of what changed. And that's where I want to talk about is this is still a rare 12mm drop stability shoe. The Brooks Adrenaline is the only one other one that I can think of off the top of my head. And people might be asking, well, are those shoes still relevant in a time where things are getting more into that moderate, like 5 to 6mm, 8mm drop? What would you need a 12mm drop stability shoe for? And the answer is there's actually a couple pathologies that people might actually benefit from using this shoe. So we know from the current evidence that the only group of people that actually can, like a stability shoe prevents injuries in, are those with a history of pronation related injuries. So tissues that, and pronation just refers to like inward motion of the ankle. There's a couple different motions that combine, but this is a normal movement. If you don't have very good control of this movement, that's where things can be a problem for certain people. If you got a history of an injury like that, like a posterior tibialis injury or Achilles, although some of the evidence on pronation Achilles is a little bit murky as I'm discovering, but some people, it can be a risk factor for them. If you've got some of the flexor toe muscles, the long ones can also they get irritated with that. If you've got a history of any of those and having a stability shoe has helped with that, it's probably going to help you in the future. A lot of those muscles, especially the posterior tibialis, also pushes and plantar flexes your foot, so it points your toes downwards, points your ankle downwards. If that muscle is stiff or your calf is stiff or your ankle's really stiff, you're not going to be able to get a lot of lengthening of that muscle or a motion called dorsiflexion, where your ankle comes up like this. If you don't have a lot of that, it's going to make it really hard to get over the front of your foot unless you have a higher drop shoe. So people that have history of injuries like posterior tibialis or problems, or if they have posterior tibialis tendinopathies where the tendon's chronically irritated, and they have really, really stiff calves or stiff ankles, and they don't have a lot of mobility at the ankle, this is a shoe and the Adrenaline that's going to actually work really, really well for people. So is this shoe still relevant? Yes. Why? Because it provides options for people, because we are all different. Is a stability shoe going to prevent injuries for everyone? No, that's not how it works. You got to be specific with your shoe choice. So the Inspire is great. It's a really solid shoe. The update, again, stability seems to be spread out a little bit more, a little bit better integrated. There's a little bit more room in the upper. It's still a solid shoe, and it's still, as I'm going to say, relevant. It's just going to work for a very unique group.